everyone, welcome back. My name is James Whitlow Delano, and today I want to introduce you to the first of the teen widows, Jazmine Durana. This is where things get complicated. Because of poverty and the war on drugs, incredibly difficult choices are forced upon young people, and I want to break them down for you. But first, let me introduce myself, and if you like what you're seeing, please hit the subscribe button. So once again, my name is James Whitlow Delano. I've worked with many of the best publications in the world. I've published several award-winning photo books, exhibited my photographs on 6 continents, and I love to pass my knowledge on to others. In 2016, I founded Everyday Climate Change on Instagram. This series was published in The Guardian, New Republic, and made possible with funding from the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting. One night in Navotas in July 2016, Jazmine Durana, 15 at the time, was sleeping with her husband Toto, baby Hazel between them. They lived in one of these houses in an estuary next to the port of Manila. You would have to approach the house over a wooden walkway. I know when I did it, I was afraid I was going to fall into the plastic and contaminated water below. The house was built on stilts, literally put together with scrap materials, and when it was rainy or windy, Toto would climb up top where 7 people lived together, 2 rooms, and tighten the ropes that were holding the house together. So on that night, 2 masked gunmen who ended up being police dragged Toto onto a little patio outside by the hair, and they put a gun in his mouth. Jazmine began to resist, and they told her, "If you resist, we will kill you too." They shot him in the head, killing him, and as he lay there dying, Jazmine said to him, "No, not yet, Pa, we have a baby." It was that fast that Jazmine found herself a widow at the age of 15.
Ole.
Jazmine continued to live with Toto's family while I was there, but eventually they had 7 people living in that house. She decided to move back with her family, her mother and father, her sister, adult brother, and they lived. Navotas is a slum area of Metro Manila. It was a slightly better, older, more established slum area. I'm sorry I can't find another word for it. I mean, it is what it is, deeply impoverished. Instead of living in a shelter of makeshift materials, the house was, though not that strong, it was at least built of cinder blocks. And that's when things got interesting, because I visited there on the second trip in 2018. She hadn't been entirely straight with us the first time about her daughter Hazel's biological father. She married Toto and legally the marriage age in the Philippines is 18, so this was a common law marriage recognized by the community and the families. So it was a de facto marriage, but Toto wasn't the biological father. The biological father had fled to an outer island because he didn't want to take responsibility for his child. And Toto was a person of character, and he loved Jazmine, so he raised Hazel as his own child. But all of that came to light on the second trip. And it is such people's ability to adapt to difficult situations is quite remarkable. And in the Philippines, people tend to be quite serious about their faith, and they have an optimism that doesn't always seem justified. So one night we went to an internet cafe because few people can afford a computer. And where else in the world would you post on Facebook a photograph of your husband in his coffin, in his casket? And Jazmine showed it to us that night. She had plans to try to bring her family out of poverty by establishing a drink stand in the local market, because they would go to bed hungry at night. She needed $150 US, 150, and that was a king's ransom for her, and it was taking her months and months because she had no work. So I'm going to try to unpack the ethical landscape of working in the slums of Manila, navigating the landscape itself. I learned a lot about levels, tiers of poverty, and how to document the truth, be sensitive, but not sanitize. I don't want to sanitize what's going on here. I want people to know what is really going on. Now, what do I mean? I mentioned that Jazmine had moved in with her mother, and they live in a cinder block slum. It's impoverished, but the walls are solid. It's an established community. And I think that these communities, which are, go through an evolution. She had lived in a structure on posts over water, built of scrap materials, wood, corrugated tin, that sort of thing, and plastic sheeting. That was the next level down of impoverishment, in vulnerability, living in the slums. But that wasn't the bottom. There were people who lived in tents. I met a woman named Sarah whose husband had been killed. He was a tricycle rider, kind of like a petty rickshaw rider. And they couldn't afford to inter him in a tomb. And finally he was interred into a group grave because they couldn't afford an individual one for her. And she lived in a tent. Somebody got angry with her, burnt her tent down. And then she moved into a chicken coop, a former chicken coop. This is what we're talking about here, okay? So you find yourself saying, how can I communicate what is going on here? What these people live through? Sensitively but accurately. I found myself in the morgue alone one night with three men, three corpses who were alive that morning. They woke up that morning not thinking, I'm going to die today. They woke up that morning like everybody else. And yet here I'm standing, a stranger looking at them, because their lives had been taken away from them. That blows the mind how fragile. There are no do-overs. Once you're dead, That's it. And it really makes you think about the casual decisions about people's lives that were being made by people who didn't even know them. And also, we tried to find the sister of one of the EJK, extrajudicial killing victims, in 2018. We knew where she lived, and it still took us 2 hours to get there. So when the assassins went, they had help. Sometimes the barangay kapitan, which is a local mayor, sometimes the police, because if you're navigating in these labyrinthian alleyways of slums, even if you know where you're going generally, to pinpoint that location, get in, get out fast, you need insider knowledge. This is where Jazmine lives. This is her life. And so I wanted to do justice to how she lived and do justice to her as a human being. So when I last saw Jazmine in 2018, she was going to open a drink stand. And then the pandemic happened, so going back was off the table. I returned in 2022 to do a story on a plastic recycling in a place called Happy Land nearby, and was an opportunity to catch up. Changes had happened. In the interim, so I mentioned that the biological father of Hazel had left for an outer island. Well, he came back and fathered a second child with Jazmine and left again. And as Jazmine put it, he was killed by the jealous ex-boyfriend of his new lover. So now she has 2 children from a man who was killed, and then Toto was killed in the war on drugs. But there was a third child. And so, as Jazmine put it, he was in prison awaiting sentencing on murder charges. He had killed another man using a peng gun, they call it. It's a pen gun, a handmade pistol. So here she is, no work, and 3 young children to take care of. And again, happily, in a way, at least her family was solid. So the deficit she was facing, can you imagine? Unemployed and not much prospect for employment, and needing to support 3 young children, 3 young mouths to feed. In an attempt to get work, she said she had received a job offer to do massage work, and she had done massage work in a place called Angeles City, rather infamous for sex work, with a Korean company. And she said she left because they asked her to do sex work, and she didn't want to do it. I'm a human being, so I did enter an opinion. I said to her, her job offer was in a place called Puerto Galera. I had been there before. It is a beach resort on a neighboring island, but there's also a lot of sex work there. And I said to her, I asked her to be very careful because I knew the bus fee is quite heavy for somebody living in Navotas. Was she sure she wanted to do this? But she said her friend had assured her that no sexual work was required. I spent time with her as she packed and saw her off to the jeepney. She didn't want anybody to go with her any further than that, and I respected that. My fixer and I gave her the space she needed, but she was back in 24 hours in Manila because, sure enough, sexual services were required. So these are they seemingly insurmountable, if you're in her situation, challenges to overcome that for somebody in a postmodern, post-industrial society would be easily overcome. But compared to their annual earnings, these are a heavy burden. And so people living in those conditions just can't extricate themselves from this crushing multi-generational poverty. And that's why I do what I do, because I think people need to know about it. There's money in the Philippines. It's just not making its way down to places like Navotas, places like Tondo. Next time I'll introduce you to Jocelyn Banting, the second teen widow I met. Her family situation is equally complex. Fascinating stuff. I want you to understand what's going on in the Philippines, and also how, as a photographer, you can tell people's story with respect, sensitivity, but not sanitize. So thank you very much. I hope to see you next time. If you like what you're seeing, please hit the subscribe button. Please tell a friend if you think that they'd be interested in this sort of work and learning how to navigate in documentary photography. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you soon.